The White House doing major damage control after former Defense Secretary Robert Gates' memoir revealed the President Obama's lack of commitment to the war in Afghanistan. It's disturbing news for military families like the ones who are about to be joined by Billy and Karen Vaughn, who lost their son Aaron when his chopper was shot down over Afghanistan. Billy and Karen, authors of the book Betrayed, are our guests this morning. We thought about you right away because you were kind enough to join me on radio and us on the couch before to talk about your son's death and the investigation of the chopper attack in 2011. So that's one thing aside. When Gates comes out and says the president wasn't committed to his own war plan that he campaigned on, what's your reaction, Billy?
Well, it's outraging to families and to warfighters on the ground that their commander-in-chief does not have their back when he sends them into harm's way. And I just want to point out real quickly, Brian, that there is, according to Congress, going to be an investigation early on in 2014, but we've received word from the inside that they're not going to talk about the foreign policies of this administration. And this is exactly what needs to be talked about. American citizens and families of warfighters need to cry out to Congress. He needs to be investigated for his foreign policies in the way that he wages war or refuses to wage war with American men and women on the ground.
Karen, he went on to say, according to Gates, the president remains uncomfortable with the inherited wars and distrustful of the military that is providing him options, although he never doubted his support for the troops. Your reaction?
My reaction comes straight from the mouth of my son, who is now deceased, as you mentioned. And Aaron's reaction was, don't you ever tell me you support the war fighter when you don't support the war. That's the biggest slap in the face that you can place on a war fighter, because what you're saying is you've dedicated your life, young man or young woman, to this nation, to fight for this nation. Your commander-in-chief is going to place you in circumstances where you need to defend this nation, and then for anybody to say they don't believe in what you've been told to do is saying they don't believe in you, bar none. And to have the commander-in-chief say that is probably the biggest slap in the face a warfighter could ever experience. If you don't believe in the war, you don't believe in the warfighter.
Billy,
it's a cruel thing to say.
Billy, the president campaigned on Afghanistan being the good war. He got his military people together and said, this is going to be the surge, 42,000 troops, this is what we're going to do. And now we find out that he never believed you could be successful. Does that trickle down to the men and women who fight this war?
Well, let me just say, again, back to Aaron. Aaron said, Dad, President Bush always had our back. He did not say this about this president. These war fighters know how their commander-in-chief feels, and yes, it does trickle down to the men and women when they're not allowed to do their job, when they're not given the equipment to fight with. And let me just say, Brian, that up until 2009, all the years that we were in Afghanistan, it took that long to reach the first 1,000 American deaths in Afghanistan. From 2009, in the next 27 months, after President Obama implemented the coin strategy in Afghanistan, we reached the second 1,000 American deaths in the next 27 months. That says something about the strategy. That says something about the winning the hearts and minds strategy. And also, as you pointed out, this president never intended to win this war. He has made that clear. And look at it. Look at Iraq. Look what's happened in Iraq. Look at the blood and the treasure that was spent in Iraq, and look where we are.
I know.
Same thing in Afghanistan.
Great points. Now, Karen, I know exactly where you and your husband are going to go when that book comes out, to the chapter about bin Laden's death and the deal that they made not to talk in detail about how he was killed, and to find out within minutes people were talking about SEAL Team 6 essentially putting a target on your son's back. He would eventually die in that chopper crash. What's going to be your focus there?
Yeah, we do want to see what he has to say about that. But let me just say that I will give Robert Gates credit for coming out right after Biden leaked that it was the Navy SEALs, and right after all that information came out that did put a target on our son's back and on the family's backs, by the way, as we were told. But I do want to say to Mr. Gates, you know, why didn't you come out then? You know, why didn't you come out with all of this information then? Billy and I have been looking for 2 years for one high-ranking leader to just come out and say what's going on in this administration, because the cost of staying silent is lives. And what I plan to do is go home and calculate how many men have died since Mr. Gates left that post. And, you know, I'm not trying to be hard on him. I appreciate the things he did say and the way he did address Joe Biden's, quote, gaffes. But I do want to know, when is somebody going to step up inside this administration and shout from the mountaintops what's going on right now that is getting our young men and women killed? Not to mention all the thousands that are being injured.
Billy, I know, 1,000, no one talks about that. Billy and Karen, thanks so much. And that is one of the biggest criticisms at the 70-year-old Gates, with all his experience and not needing the job. Why didn't he speak up when he had the job? Thanks so much for joining me. We'll read the book. We'll zero in on that chapter. And thanks again for your sacrifice and for what Aaron did for this country. And we'll pick up your book.
Brian.
Stephen, Elizabeth, tell us what's next.